see that you're still awake. And maybe this has been such a long day, it's becoming tiresome to take notes. So I'm going to mention a lot of tools today, and I put them all in a Medium post that you can find on this URL. So don't be, if I'm going too fast, you can find it here. And yes, there are 3 A's in that handle. So first off, I'm going to just start with why I even think it's important to use the test in the first place. Reason number 1, hygiene. When you were younger, your parents might have told you you need to clean your hands because you're going to have dinner, and maybe you were one of the small little kids that said, well, look, Mom, they are clean. I don't have to clean them. Your parents would probably tell you that you can't see whether your hands are clean. That's not how it works. You have to clean them anyway in case there's something there that you can't see. And it's actually the same way with our designs. You can't tell if the design of your site is usable just by looking at it. One example, earlier today, the hamburger icon for menus was mentioned, and it was said that, well, we all know what this means. And actually, we tested that with a representative part of the Norwegian population. It was in the context of a mobile site with the arrow pointing out, what does this button do? And 70% got it wrong. Of the Norwegian population anyway. Maybe the Brits are smarter. Anyway, we didn't think, we were arguing about it, so we tested it. We couldn't just look at it and know that it was usable. And the other one is innovation. People would like their designs to be intuitive. If you made it, you can't really know if it's intuitive. Someone else has to look at it, and you have to find out if they understand it. And for a long time, these were the 2 reasons that I typically gave. But one of the third reasons, which is actually what gives names to this talk, to never show a design you haven't tested, is that it's actually a great tool to guide discussions that you have with stakeholders and clients. Which leads me to this aha moment I had. And then I realized I'm a Norwegian in UK, so this is the aha moment. This is the aha moment, I'm sorry. We have had a client way back since 2011 called Plan. I think they're in the UK too. They have like a sponsored child. It's a charity. And we've been working, this is a site that we made way back in 2011. And the whole idea was that picking a sponsored child was going to be something, either Plan would just choose a child wherever in the world, or you can say, oh, I want a girl or a boy this age, maybe from this part of the world, because maybe, you just went to Uganda and you want a child that's the same age as your child or something like that. Over the years, it kind of turned out in a way that felt a little bit more like a shopping cart, like you were shopping a sponsored child. You see this thing on the form on the left here. So this feels you're really making a connection here. Gender, let Plan choose. Age, let Plan choose. World, part of the world, let Plan choose. Country, let Plan choose. Which didn't kind of not maybe the kind of feeling you want to give when someone signs up to have a sponsored child. But this form had been going back and forth. We've been discussing it for the last 4 years, and we were going to just freshen up the design because they had gotten a new brand. And the site was working quite well. We wanted to change the form, but then, do we really want to go there? Do we really have that discussion about that form again? That we've been going back and forth all these years, and then we figured, well, we do want to have that discussion. We think there's a better way, but how can we convince them? So that's when we had the aha moment. This was Monday. We were going to have a meeting on Thursday, and then we said, well, let's just prototype it and test it and show them in the meeting that it actually works. So we won't have the debate of whether it works, but just a debate of whether we should implement it. So this is what happens in one day. So on the left here, that's what I do. Luckily, on the right here, I have good designers that I can work with. But I really like that he left out the mustache I drew on that guy, so that didn't make it to the final design. The girl is pretty similar though, so. we're getting there. And so we showed up in the meeting, not saying, well, by the way, do you think maybe we can change the form? We came into the meeting saying, hey, yesterday we did a test on the new design that we're suggesting, and this is what happened. This is what worked really well, and these are the things that needs improvement. And it turned out to be one of the best client meetings I've ever had. Because instead of arguing about whether it would work or not, and by the way, I don't like yellow, we were talking about, well, what are the little tweaks that we can do to make it work even better? Because the thing that we found in usability, that these are supposed to be drop-downs. It's like, I want to be a sponsor for a boy or a girl under 15 in a country that needs help. So this wasn't very clickable to the user, and then we just had talking about, well, maybe it should be like totally blue or something like that, instead of having a debate of whether the whole concept for a form would work. So for the last year, then I tried to make this kind of like a dogma: never show a design I haven't tested. Because if this was the greatest client meeting I ever had, maybe they would just keep working. So, but then you might say, well, that sounds great, but I don't have time for user testing. So that's actually what I'm going to focus on today: how you can make time for user testing, even if you feel like you don't have any budget, whether even for costs or time or anything, it's still doable. That's what I'm going to try to convince you about today. So the first thing is to sell it like you mean it, or if you're not working in a consultancy, how to make time for it in the planning phase. The number one mistake that my company used to do when it came to selling or making room for user testing was we made it optional. Don't make it optional. The thing is, we looked at the total, it looked kind of expensive. It's like, well, we have to get the total down. And then we said, well, let's just, the user testing happens later on, let's make it optional, and then we can probably make an upsell later, and then they'll do the user testing. Like, who wants to buy anything that the first time they heard about it, what you told them about the thing was that it was optional? Like, you don't really need it, but we're still going to try to sell it. Nobody buys that. So don't make it optional. The second thing is to describe the objective of user testing rather than the procedure. The procedure just sounds very boring and expensive, but not if you describe the objective. I'm going to give you two examples. So typically in the project proposals that we send, it would say usability lab test with 5 people. And this is one of the things that we did very often, so it had a fixed price or flat fee, as we talked about earlier. Whereas today, and it was optional, of course, I'd write something like, quality assurance and testing. We'll use the methods we deem most suitable at different stages of the process, e.g. usability lab tests, guerrilla testing, click tests, blah, 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 to make sure we get it right. And I've had people ask me to scale down on usability lab testing, and I never had a client ask me to scale down the get it right part. You see the difference? Okay. So maybe you're starting just with the rhetorics. So even from the get-go, you need to have the right rhetorics to make usability testing part of the project plan. Third thing I would do is when you're planning, try, if you want to scale it down, you can scale down the documentation that you're promising of the tests instead of the test itself. So here, from a few months back, we were testing with the Norwegian Labour Party. And what we did then, instead of making a big report or a PDF or a video or anything, we just scheduled 20 to 30 minute break between each test subject. And then we would just discuss between ourselves what worked and what didn't. And then, because this guy here, Jørgen, is a very talented front-end designer, he'd just fix them, and then we'd test again, and then we could see if it worked. So when the day was finished, we tested with 4 people and fixed 20 issues, and we could all go home and feel proud of ourselves. No more work for the next day. And then we would just contribute our observations from the test directly into a shared Slack channel just there and then. And that's all of the documentation that we did. Typically, when user testing takes a lot of time is when you say you think that you need to make a big report and write it all down and have screenshots of everything. Another way also, if you need other people to be able to understand what happened in the test, is to just have screenshots of the site ready in Envision app. And then you can just add comments to the relevant screenshots of where you had issues or not. Because then you could just go, this thing, they didn't get this thing. And you don't need to have a paragraph to describe, well, right now I'm talking about the secondary menu on the third page below the blue bubbly thing. That needs to work better. You just like this thing, which makes it so much easier to take notes and have people understand, well, what's the thing you're really talking about. And the fourth thing then is, in the planning phase, is to scale down the prototype rather than the testing itself. Because sometimes I've heard people say that, well, we can't, our prototype isn't ready for testing, or we have to make a much more complicated prototype if we're going to test. But prototypes can have so many different forms, and typically you can think there's two axes here. One is more on the visual side. So on the one end, maybe like just plain text, a paper sketch, and then you could have more detailed visuals like a Photoshop sketch, and also whether they are functional or not. So you could do like a paper prototype, like you move the different, you have different sketches and you move them according to what the user does, or like a very plain HTML prototype with very basic styling. So you don't really need to have the final product to test something. If you're wondering if a text works, you just need the texts. If you're wondering if a sign-up form will work, if they will understand the form, you just need to prototype the form. If something looks, will people understand that this is clickable? You just need that one page where that clickable thing is. So make the smallest thing that you can make to enable to just test it. So lots of things that you can scale down on to make it easier. But there's one thing that you don't, that you can't scale down on. And that is to never compromise on testing with actual users. Colleagues are not your users. Unless you're making your own intranet. It shouldn't be an intranet, it should be your own intranet, actually. And so, okay, I'm not going to ask my colleagues, I'm going to ask some designers. Well, they are not your users either. Maybe unless you're making Dribble. Same with developers, maybe, unless you're designing GitHub. And it's true that you're going to get a lot of feedback from these people, and it's actually been researched. So there's a boring table, brace yourself. So this is a comparison of the number of errors that experts found versus the number of errors that users found and how much they overlap. And as you can see, the overlap is typically 30 to 40%. So if you're testing with your colleagues, you will only find 40% of what the actual users found. And then the question is, well, those other 60% that your colleagues found that the users didn't really found, are they really problems? Or is it just something your colleagues don't like? Yeah, so false alarm. This is the percentage of things that experts found that users did not found, which is basically a false alarm. So, like, I don't need to use a test, my colleagues are great. They're probably great, but that's not a reason to not test with users. But how many people do you need? The magic number, you probably heard this before, is 5. Raise your hand if you've heard this before. Raise your hand if you know why. No one knows? Is this formula? Okay. So usually I use, to explain this, usually I use the example of Norwegian politics, but let's take British politics. I know you had an election recently. So, for instance, so when you did polling for the Brexit polling, okay, how many people would you ask? You wouldn't ask 5 people, obviously. But if we just go out on the street here, or maybe, I don't know, this part of the town, I'm not sure, I don't know the demographics that well. If you just take an average UK city anywhere in UK and you ask 5 people, it's very unlikely that you will get 0 Brexit voters. Do you understand what I'm saying? Maybe I'm just messing up with so if you, not maybe right here, but if you go anywhere in the UK, take 5 random people, it's very unlikely that you're going to have 0 people. Well, what it's like, you won't be able to tell by asking from 5 people how common it is to vote the one or the other, but it's unlikely that you're not going to observe something that is pretty common. Okay, so this is complicated math, but the thing is, this is the graph. If you have a usability problem that in reality is occurring at approximately 30% of the cases, if you test with 5 people, there's like an 80% chance or 85% chance that you're going to observe the usability problem. So you only need to get to 5 people to have like an 85% chance of like a dice roll of 5 and 6. And so why don't you test with more people? Well, if you add 3 more people, you just get to 95%. So like adding more people that you're testing with after you've tested with 5 doesn't really give you that much more confidence in your results. Even just testing with 3 people, you're getting to around 70% chance of observing the most important usability issues. You need you won't, and you can all do the math with this one, I think. What's your probability if you test with 0 people? So that's why we say you only need to test with 5 people. You only need to test with 5 people to have a high probability of observing the most common problems. But of course, this won't tell you how common the problem is. You don't know if that guy that had the huge problem, if he's the weirdo or your prototype is really screwed up. But it is a problem anyway. And if it's easy to fix, you can fix it anyway. Maybe even if he's just like a 5% of people will have that problem. And of course, I think you need to combine the different methods. Typically, people think about the difference between qualitative and quantitative testing, but also very important is the difference between observed, what people actually do, and self-report, what they say they do. And I think usability works best, or it does work best, if you try as well as you can to make it an observed method. So not asking people what they feel or what they think or should it be this way or that way, because then you're basically making it into a focus group. What you should do is just give them a problem to solve and see how they do, or how you do, because it's you made the thing that they're testing. Okay, so let's get more specific here. 7 low-cost, low-effort techniques that you can use tomorrow. The prices I'm going to aim at here is from £0 and up, and from 15 minutes and up. So this should be doable on any budget. So number 1, it's very cheap, but you need guts. Hit the streets. Takes maybe 1 to 4 hours. Important cost, snacks. So you need a laptop or a tablet or a phone and a street. You have that, right? We actually did this. It's in December. That's why we're wearing so much clothes. This is with the Norwegian Labour Party again. We went down to the central station in Oslo. Had this huge basket of snacks. It's very important to have bananas because people who think they're on a diet, they will avoid you if you don't have healthy snacks, but then they'll take the chocolate anyway. But it's kind of like to ease them into it. And then so we have the basket, and then you put the iPad. I prefer the iPad. It's a very approachable device. And you have that on the back. You can see I have that on the back of the basket. And then you go to the central station, and you don't take these guys. No, you're going to go over, because you think that, oh, no, you can't go to Central Station. People are so busy at the Central Station. But, there's lots of people that aren't really that busy. You can't really see them because they're like this. And then you just sneak up on them, and you just go like this with your basket. And then they see the chocolate, and then it's already too late, and you hand them the iPad. And then you give them the chocolate. It works. I think it took 2 hours, and we tested with 12 people. And we didn't even have to give, this is, I think, what the snack bowl looked like when we came back. So then we had chocolate. So it's very, I can't believe you say, oh, I'm kind of introverted, I want to die when you say this. That's okay. But don't tell me that you don't have the time or the resources to do it. Find someone on your team that's very outgoing. And this is a very easy way to get users inside. Since it typically works for small interactions, it has to be like you can say them, it's just going to take 2 minutes or 3 minutes. It's like a form or 1 page. Don't try to test the whole site, because then you're an asshole. But for one form, 12 people, perfect. So, number 2. Who here has had arguments with their clients about what to put in the menu? Raise your hand. Oh, you all had it. Well, here's the solution. Let's test the information architecture. It takes from 30 minutes and up. There's a free version. There's like a cap of how many you can test with. You could start out with the free version. Paid is like $99 monthly. So if you're in a larger company, this is gonna be a very useful investment. So we end up getting results that look like this. So what you do is that in the interface here, this is what you see on the left. You kind of recreate the information architecture of the site in like a tree structure. And then you're creating tasks for people to solve. And then they navigate through that information architecture. So, your son has just bought a smartphone and you want him to keep it safe. Where would you look to buy a protective case? I don't know why that guy was American, but he was. And then they just click through it and say, I think I'm going to find it here. And afterwards, then you get a tree like this. So you can see, so when it's green, people took the correct path, because you nominate correct answers. And the thicker the line is, the more people went down that path. So this is what it looks like when you did a good job. So we did the good job first. And this is what it looks like when you did a bad job. But that's why you test. So you can realize that you made one of these. That's what I thought when I saw that. It's like, oh, hello. Okay, so first click test. Method number 3, also digital, so very easy to set up. Basically the same price. So after we made this, what you call that runaway bush? I don't know what it's called in English. Tumbleweed. So after we made this tumbleweed, we thought, well, we suck at our jobs. And then we thought, well, let's try and detail it more. Because it is, after all, this was a very complex information architecture. Could we help it if we did something more visual? So we took the information architecture, tweaked it a little bit, the groupings according to the test from the information architecture test, and then we made it more into one long site of groups of links. So this is from an intranet for the Norwegian Labour Party. And then we asked all of the same questions as we did in the information architecture test, but now we're instead asking people to say where on the photo they would click. So they get an image and they click, and then we get a heat map of where they clicked. But it's the same question, so we can see if we're doing better than we did in the first thing. And so this is what it looked like. You can see the little dots here, those are clicks. And now we're having 80% of people click on the right place instead of 12%. So now we don't have to kill ourselves anymore. Okay, so number 4, live experiments or experience with audience you already have. This takes 30 minutes and up, and typically it will be free. So I had, as I mentioned earlier, I had created this dogma that I would never show design I hadn't tested. But then we were going to make these feature articles for Plan International, which are basically long reads about the work they're doing in different countries. And how do you use to test that? You like put someone into the lab and like, please read this story about Uganda. So like, what are we looking for? Like people, we told them to read, so if they're reading, that's because we told them. And if they're bored, maybe they're not that interested. Like, how would you even test this? So we realized instead that we already had a very detailed prototype, and we always prototype with actual content. We never use lorem ipsum in my company. So we figured, well, if we just share the prototype on the Facebook page, which is what they're going to do with the final product too, and newsletters and so forth, and just not tell them that it's a prototype. Maybe that will work. So they just shared the story, the prototype that we'd made, and like, come on and read this about the story when Alexander met his sponsored child, Jonathan. So nothing here about the fact that it's a prototype, just share it as we would when it was the final product, and then people would come in and read it, and we made sure that all of the links on the page would go to their existing site, because the prototype wouldn't be functional. So the thing that we were worried about, because you see there's like huge photos here, is whether the huge photos would make people think that the page was finished. Was there like a fall off? So using a tool called Hotjar, you can actually get heat maps of where people scroll. So now you can also get answer to that question, where is the fault? And as you can see, it's a very gradual drop-off. So using this tool, we could kind of eliminate the hypothesis that the images were going to make people think that the page was finished because it's so gradual. And also, in addition to that, we also had Google Analytics, so we could see what people clicked, and we also had that on the other side, so we could see what people that came through that feature story were doing on the next page. So we already had the prototype, then we could just throw it out and see whether it worked or not. So this is basically free, because we were doing the work that we had to do anyway, and just adding a share and adding some analytics tools. Number 5, did you get it done? I have a genius colleague who made something over the weekend, so now this just takes 15 minutes and up, and it can be free. I'm going to show you how. Oh, I didn't update that price. Anyway. You've probably seen one of these. Was this helpful? Yes or no? It's an extremely useful tool if you want, especially if you're working with content strategy. This is actually from the city of Oslo. They have like a dashboard where they're ranking their pages and the different departments if they get the most yes and the most no, so they know where they're going to focus their content efforts, and trying then over time to have more no's and less no's and more yeses, of course. There's a weak trend here. It's going the right way, city of Oslo. Yay. But the thing is, now that we have tools like Google Tag Manager, so my colleague made this in the week. So if you go to feedleback.com, I'm giving the links afterwards, you can actually add this to your site. So did you find what you're looking for? Yes or no? Yeah, Spice of Design, I told Aalen to fix that. And send feedback. And so you can actually add this to your page afterwards, just by using Google Tag Manager or adding this script to your site, and then you have it. So that's basically free. And isn't this guy happy? I know it's in Norwegian, but don't you want to know what he's saying? This is the chief municipal executive of the county of Drammen. And he's on like the main radio news show in Norway, and he's so exciting. And what he's saying in this exact moment is, we have 850,000 visitors, and they can't find what they're looking for. He's so excited because he has a dashboard like this. So they're using another tool that we made called Task Analytics. So we're asking people, what did you come for? So you have like a rank of the user, not like used to tasks that people have. And then we ask them afterwards, well, did you get it done? So you can rank both what are the most important things that people come for and whether or not they get it done. So yellow is bad, as you can guess. So that's another tool. And also both of these, of course, have ways to give qualitative feedback too, which are very important too. Two more techniques here. Microtesting content. This technique was developed by Laura Arlav. She's from the Norwegian Tax Authority. Crazy fun fact about the Norwegian Tax Authority, the Norwegians love them. That's crazy. They have this trick that everyone, if they paid the right amount of taxes, will get 5,000 kroners back. So most people will get money back. They just counter that in. So, oh, yeah, I'm getting money back. They're going to be in the majority of the people that get money back. That's very clever. That's why people like them, I think. Okay, so this is free. All you need to do this is you need a printer. So what you do is that you print whatever text you want to test, and you have like the title and the intro. And then you fold the sheet. Fold the sheet so they can only see the title and the intro. And then you ask them to write down 3 to 4 questions they expect to get answered on this page. So first they do that. And then you tell them to open the sheet and say, well, can you highlight where you got answers to your questions? And also make other notes that they did. This is so easy. And you get incredibly valuable feedback. And the thing is that the opening question, if you just give people the text, they're not thinking about their expectations. You're going to get like, oh, you need to fix this grammar, or there's a typo here. So it's very effective to guide feedback. And you can even do it like on the phone or email. Like, hey, here's a text. I'm going to send you a couple of emails. So that's, if you don't have time for that, I feel very sorry for you, because then you have no time at all. Okay, so last technique. The last technique is the most expensive one, the one that takes the most resources and the most, both in time and cost, but it's still totally doable, especially like if you're a design company of 1, it's not going to be doable. But I think if you're 20 people, 30 people, it's totally doable. So this is a weekly drop-in test day. If you're smaller, maybe it could be bi-weekly. So you need some hours, of course, per project being tested, the time spent observing the tests, and also you need to, when you're having people come into usability lab and spend like an hour there, you need to reward them somehow, so you have more cost there, and there's also the minimal cost of setting up a lab. So you don't need a fancy lab, actually. You just need a laptop, and if you need recordings, apps like Silverback or Camtasia do that great. If you need a room where people can observe the tests, well, then you just need 2 laptops, one that you're doing the test and one for observation, and then some kind of software to transfer the image from one room to the other. And actually, now a colleague of mine tested out this, the same colleague actually, I have this magical colleague that just fixes everything. His name is Aalen. You can even do eye tracking just using a webcam. So this is from a test that Eyes Decide. So here you can see this is eye tracking based on a webcam on the computer. And this, if I remember correctly, I don't remember what the price of that tool was, but it's a lot cheaper than those $1,000 or $10,000 eye tracking machines that I sold a couple of years ago. If you need to test a mobile, a webcam and a tripod gets you pretty far, but even better is this technique called hugging. Do you see what he's doing? Just take the laptop, turn it around. Hey, you have your own smartphone-enabled usability test lab. Again, all you need is 2 laptops and some software. So setting up a lab, that's the easy part. That's practically free today. So after you set up lab, so the way we've organized it, we have a test day every Wednesday. And then we have one person that's responsible moderating the test, like being in the room with the user and doing all the recruiting, because you have one person doing it every week. It just, that's more efficient. So each time, because you remember that graph when we talked about the sweet spot of how few users can you test with and still have quite a good chance of observing the biggest issues. So we have 4 test subjects each Wednesday. And they typically test 2 to 4 different projects that we're working on. So they're there for an hour, but they might spend like 20 to 15 minutes testing different projects. So what people do is like they sign up and go to Are, that's my colleague who's in charge. It's like, hey Are, I want to test this thing on Wednesday. Do you have space for me? And he might say yes, or he might say, well, you have to wait till next Wednesday. So it's extremely time efficient way to set up usability lab testing, and we've seen a very big increase in how much testing people actually do after we introduce this. Yeah, so this is from the test day, again with the Norwegian Labour Party. And also very fun, because often we have clients come in and observe too, and they typically enjoy it too, because then you have like one TV channel sitting there with the city of Oslo, and then they're like, oh, they're commenting on each other's usability problems and their different sites, and they seem to enjoy it too. So I mentioned 7 methods, and probably you're wondering, which one should I use? Do I have to use all 7? And of course, the answer is, it depends. But I'm going to try and recommend something. Anyway, so one thing that's very cheap. So, you know, if you hit the streets, you do many of those quick informal tests, maybe testing a form, and you combine that with testing the information architecture. Then you probably, like your main conversion page and the general structure, you've found out pretty much. And if you also include the did you get it done thing, you can also see when after you launch the site whether it's actually working. So those 3 are very cheap, and they kind of, I don't know how you say that in English, but they complement each other. Is that the word? Yeah. So the information, another one is keeping the information architecture, doing the micro-testing of the content maybe instead of the did you get it done, because then you can test whether this page actually answers what people are wondering, and then combine it with the weekly drop-in lab test. But there's like 2 methods that I think that you should do in every project. I think you should do one of these. Go out and meet actual users face to face. Or they have them come to you and you meet them face to face. But that face-to-face qualitative insight is so valuable. And for instance, with Hit the Streets, we were testing a new map application for the Norwegian Post. We just went down to the post office. Lots of bored people waiting for the packages, and they're totally in the user group. So it's not really that difficult. So I hope I've managed to convince you that you can do user testing on your budget and on your time, and then we can be like cats flying on bacon in space. Because that's how awesome user testing is. Thank you.